Dear participants, welcome in the second unit of our certificate course on advanced academic writing for students in English studies. In this unit, which is titled as Academic Writing Style and Language, you are going to study some of the very important components of academic writing. And this is a very important unit. It's a bit difficult also, but you can say it is a kind of a climatic unit of our certificate course. The objective of the second unit, this unit scaffolds students into the language they need to write a successful literary analysis. The components of this unit are first, academic writing style, then second, cautious language, third, logical connectors, and fourth, vocabulary. I would request Mr. Clement to explain in brief what components are incorporated in all these four subtopics of unit number 2. So, Mr. Clement, what have you included in first component, that is academic writing style?
In academic writing style is about formality. So it is about the do's and the don'ts of academic writing, what you have to do and what you have to avoid. So there's something that you have to avoid when you're writing an academic writing. For instance, contractions, interjections, addressing the reader directly, inappropriate negative forms, short forms of words, slang, number at the beginning of the sentence. Those are some of the things that you need to avoid when writing an academic paper.
Okay, interesting. So, dear friends, formality, the first component for academic writing, there are two things which we have to keep in mind: absence of conversational style and the use of appropriate vocabulary. And second is avoid contractions, interjections, and addressing the readers directly, inappropriate negative forms like not, any, many, few, that should be avoided in this writing. Okay, so Mr. Clement, at the end of this 2.1, what are participants supposed to do?
So at the end of this point, so the student have to do a submission. So the first one is multiple choice questions, and the second submission is a write up. So with the reference to one literary text they have read or studied, they have to discuss how literature have shaped them.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Well, dear participants, let me remind you. You have done first submission when you were filling the form. During registration form, you have done one submission. Second submission you have done when you appeared in unit 1 submission test. That was the second. Now this is the third one. In a way, third submission. And this is about how literature have shaped me. And what you have to keep in mind is that what you have studied in 2.1, formality of writing, with keeping those two components in mind, you are supposed to write a small write-up of only 500 words, and you have to submit this write-up here. Okay, so Mr. Clement, in the second component of this unit number 2, there is cautious language. Tell us briefly about what is this.
So cautious language is about how writers or speakers convey their commitment to the truthfulness of the arguments that they are making in their writing or when they are speaking. So in literature, it is about connecting the portrayal of character and your interpretation of the portrayal of character, connecting the portrayal of character and the argument you are making. For instance, if you go to this example, so the overwhelming paranoia that drives the protagonist to madness, it means that they described what the protagonist went through in the literary work being analyzed, and they interpreted this paranoia, this madness of the protagonist using a cautious language. So in order to interpret this paranoia, you see that the writer have used it may be indicative of the guilt of a nation haunted by its wrongs and fortifies by the legitimacy of Walker's previously cited statement. This is how we write in academic writing. When you are interpreting, you have to make sure that what you are saying is true, or if it is not true 100%, you have to use those wording.
Very interesting. Very, really, indeed, an interesting point. What is the second component of this?
So the second components, of course, there are many wordings that we have to use. For instance, we have to use modal verbs, and that can be used in this way. So we have may, might, can, could, and others. So we have modal adjuncts, what we call in grammar. So we have perhaps, probably, uh, presumably, and we have modal attribute. It is possible, it is likely that evidence appearance based postulation, it seems that, it appears that, apparently, this suggests that these are some kind of wording that we use when we are writing, when we are making an argument, to make sure that we understand what we are doing in our writing.
Okay, very interesting. Now, dear participant, this both these points are very interesting. Yeah, cautious language. Yeah? So when the a kind of a commitment towards truthfulness in our arguments is made, at that time, this linguistic markers like maybe is indicative of something. So when we are doing interpretations at that time, these kinds of linguistic markers maybe probably plays a very vital role here. The same way, all these modal verbs or adjuncts or attributes, which perhaps, probably, presumably, it is possible that, it is likely that, this makes our arguments, our standing in our arguments also very significant here. Well, so Mr. Clement, what are students supposed to do after studying this component?
So they have to do two exercises also. So the first exercise is a multiple choice questions, and the second exercise they have to rewrite their answer to the the story of click in the first unit by using those strategies, by using those wordings, those cautious language that we have seen earlier in this unit.
Okay, let me remind you, dear participants, that in the first unit you have submitted one write-up, and that was based on the short story Click. Remember that. Now, the same write-up you have to do rewriting with the help of the components that you have studied in cautious language. Remember again, let me repeat, the write-up that you have submitted in Unit 1 is to be rewritten. You don't have to submit new write-up here. The same write-up you have to resubmit here, but now you have to be cautious about using cautious language. Well, Mr. Clement, what is the third component here in Unit number 2?
In unit number two, the component is logical connectors. Logical connectors is about connecting ideas together logically. So there is some certain courses that help readers to understand the flow of ideas. So they are using to signal a number of relationships. We have addition, time, illustration, or to contrast idea. So in response to a literary text, some of these connectors are used to make ground conclusion, show an understanding of the depiction of characters. So you have to make an understanding to show that you understand. So the characterization in the work under in you are analyzing. For instance, you can use therefore and hence, and you have an example here. So, for example, if you are making an interpretation, so you can say if writing and the language is seen as open only to male, it could be argued that the collapse of the narration is inevitable, as masculine language is an ineffective medium for female to use. And then, so this text, therefore, then you are interpreting them. So you can use therefore, or hence, or thus. So when you are making that conclusion, what you understand from this.
Yeah, well, interesting. Yeah, yes.
Others are used to provide the reason why a particular argument is made. So these logical connectors often appear in reason-result interpropositional relations as a result, because, due. It means that so you were making a reason for making a given argument. It means that, for instance, if you say Eliot fundamentally misunderstood this, misunderstood. So what he talked about, or she talked about in his book, and as a result, fundamentally misunderstood God's character, seeing him only as an oppressive tyrant. This is how you can
Yeah, good
make a
one.
reason
Yeah, yeah,
for.
good one. It's a very interesting example. Yeah, okay, yes.
So others are using to acknowledge a possible interpretation so that the writer can provide his own interpretation. So these logical connectors often appear in a concession, counter expectancy, interpropositional relationship. So we use however, but, although. So for instance, if you say, although it is concessive, although innovative and atypical in content, it means that you acknowledge that the text is innovative and atypical in content, but much of his verses is traditional in form and meter, exemplified in poems such as Sleeper and the Valley of the Unrest. It means that you are against the idea that even although it is innovative, there is something else that is not good for the text. So that is the argument you are making. You are making your own argument, and you are trying to sustain your argument by showing that the other argument is not totally true, cannot be sustained.
Yeah, sounds really very interesting. And what are the exercises that they have to do after 2.3?
Uh, After 2.23, they have to do also two exercises. The first exercise is about multiple choice questions, and the second exercise is about the how literature shaped you. So they have to rewrite their write-up in a 2.1 in 2.1. So they have to write their answer to this, and by including these logical connectors that we have seen
Yeah.
in this part.
Yeah. Okay. So, dear friends, this is 2.3 is very interesting, and a component. If you master it, your writing can be significantly different from many other students. And let me remind you, what is your submission here? Here, your submission is about how literature shaped me, which you have submitted earlier. Now, again, you are going to rewrite the same submission. Remember, you don't have to write a new submission. This is only rewriting the submission that you have given on how literature has shaped me with the help of the components that you have studied in 2.3. Well, Mr. Clement, what is the final component of this unit?
So the final component of this unit is about the vocabulary. Vocabulary is also very good characteristic of an academic writing. So in literature, so we use many kind of words, and in literature we use them in order uh, to show our emotion through the text, to evaluate the characters, and to evaluate the aesthetic quality of the work being analyzed. So sometimes we use nouns, verbs, adjectives to develop an emotional response to a literary text. Sometimes we use nouns and verbs to evaluate the behavior of characters, their attitudes. So, for instance, we can use violate, weak, obsessive, hypocrite, but you have to interpret what you are describing. If he is, you describe him as weak or as obsessive, you have to interpret, you have to show what does this obsession means for you. So we use also adjectives to evaluate the quality of the work. Other words also are used to connect then, to connect the depiction of characters and then the argument you are developing. So you develop an argument, but you develop an argument out of the characterization of, of a work you are analyzing. So you have to connect those ideas. You have to connect the argument you are making with the characterization in the work being analyzed. That is very important. Some of these choices include these shows, demonstrate, infer, imply. This is indicative of. This may be indicative of. There are many other wordings that you can use in order to interpret, to connect the characterization and the argument you are making.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. So, what are the exercises that are to be submitted as a part of 2.4?
So in this component also, they have to submit two exercises. So the first exercise, they have to relate their answer to the short story, click, by developing their emotional response to the character, by evaluating the behavior of the character, and by interpreting now, by interpreting the depiction of those characters and the event in which they get involved. So they have to do that when to write their short story, the answer to the short story, click. And the second question is about multiple choice question.
Okay, so dear participants, let me remind you the in Unit 1 you have written the your response to the short story click, which you have rewritten again in 2.2. Now again you are rewriting the same thing third time the same comma, but now with the help of vocabulary, the unit that you have studied here. Now try to implement your learning into your third draft of your emotional response to the short story click, and that is to be submitted as a part of this. So dear friends, as I told you that this is going to be a little bit lengthy but a very important unit, and in this unit you have four write-ups to be submitted. Yeah? In this unit number 2 you have four write-ups to be submitted and four multiple choice questions are to be submitted. Your scores in either of the things, your scores in write-ups as well as in multiple choice questions will be reflected in your final certificate also. So dear participants, wish you all the best for happy learning in the second unit. Thank you all of you.